you really connected with yoga when you were young. Was that even as a child, were you able to identify that this was helping you calm down if you were an anxious child?
Very much so. And the practice of, meditation, chanting, especially as a child, I loved the chanting, the simple meditation and things. Just really, I loved it. And in a way, it was really nice to come to it as a child because I wasn't particularly fussed about doing things the right way or, perfecting anything. Like I was not in any way interested in perfecting my headstand or anything. I just enjoyed the journey of it. And that is a really nice way to come to the practice without the kind of that adultness of trying to exceed or trying to compete or or telling yourself that you should be better at this.
And it's such an interesting activity to put your child in. Most people are gonna, especially here, people are putting their kids in, little league, or they're putting their little girls are in dance classes and their little boys are in baseball. They're 5 years old and they throw them into that. Now, I am not a parent, so I can't really speak to that as a parent, but I know as a child and for my friends who have children, that's the default. Oh, we have a 5-year-old little boy, let's put him in baseball. Nobody goes, oh, I have a 7-year-old little kid who's anxious, let's put them in yoga, where I feel like they should. I don't think I've ever seen a children's yoga class. Ever.
Oh, really? They're huge here in England. We have them in schools, we have them in kind of playgroup and things, and some of them are super corny. It's all kind of let's be the mouse in the cheese.
How great is that?
Small.
But then you're also teaching imagination. Do you teach any children's classes, or you stick primarily?
I have friends who teach kids, and I always say, it's hard enough to keep an adult's attention. Like heaven knows how you do it with kids,
right?
Blimey. But the people that do it, they love it, and it's hugely rewarding. So children's yoga is a beautiful thing. I benefited from it, but I do not have the patience to do it myself.
Okay. So you are a child and you are growing up going to folk festivals, and you're growing up going to yoga, and yoga at a young age, I would imagine, really gives you a sense of self, a sense of, like you said, meditation, so transcendence of the physical reality into the emotional and spiritual reality, where most of us don't find that until we decide we want to find it on our own as adults. How did that sort of dovetail into you finding a witchcraft path?
Again, some of it would be luck, as well as this is just such a God. My childhood was a riot. It's, as well as the Morris dancing and as well as the yoga. I was a member of the Woodcraft folk, which is a pagan version of Guides and Scouts. I don't know if you have it in America, but it's very kind of nature-based, pagan-y.
That's freaking amazing. There's something here called Spiral Scouts, but is specifically pagan. It's billed as this is a pagan Girl Scout, Boy Scout, right? It's specifically that way. But I mean, no, there's you got Boy Scouts, you got Girl Scouts. Yeah.
There you go. I don't know why we were in this place where all the options were the slightly kind of esoteric ones, but
it's
lucky
amazing.
for me they were. And it would take many years for me to kind of blend all this together and think, oh wow, what a great foundation. The idea of blending it all together took me a lot longer. But on reflection, it's wonderful that all these kind of many threads came together into something. And that's the joy of writing books, I suppose, the kind of random path I've taken through life. It's I can weave it all together. How wonderful that it all came together like that.
And in terms of a spiritual upbringing, were your parents, did they follow a spiritual path? Did they have a strict religion, or were they just hey, whatever floats your boat? So that's why I say they're groovy, right? Because they just they
were pretty groovy. Look at, it's exactly. No religion of any kind. A love of folk festivals. I have an uncle that plays the accordion. He used to play the accordion in a band.
Can I just come hang out with your family? You
could hang out with my aunt, the witch. She's loving the books, and she features briefly in the books, and she absolutely loves it. So Yeah, you can come hang out with my dysfunctional, witchy, folksy family.
Yeah, any day. And I will make a big fat lasagna and
Yes.
and I'll hang out with all of you and it would be fantastic. So I just find it really, really amazing that there are so, like you said, I love the term that you use, the threads that sort of weave together of your experience in life, because I think that's what we all have. Our experiences, our pasts, our upbringing, they shape us, whether it is saying, I'm going to dive deeper into this, or I'm going to be a cycle breaker for things that are, traumatic or whatever. But I'm also super interested in, you're going to laugh at me. I am so into your neuroscience background. And I love the ideas of science supporting witchcraft and witchcraft supporting science, because there are things on our plane of existence that make sense esoterically, but also makes sense scientifically. When we talk about vibration, I interviewed Nicholas Pearson, who is this amazing geologist, and his background is science of geology, but he works with crystals and stones and all of those sort of things. And we had this amazing conversation about the science of vibration in Earth, and then how our stones vibrate that we do magical workings with. So at what point, okay, so you're a kid and you're doing your dancing and you're going to folk festivals and you're doing yoga, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, neuroscience, psychology. How does that happen?
Oh gosh, again, I feel like the actual reasons behind a lot of them are not as wonderful as as I wish they were. But I wanted to go to university. I wanted specifically to go to university in Bath because it is a beautiful place. A lot of my family are from here. Yeah. It is a magical goddess kind of place.
Yes.
And Bath University is quite well known to be a very kind of hard sciences university. Really? So literally the only thing I was qualified to study was psychology. So it's not even that cool. It's not fun. It's like, I couldn't do maths, I couldn't do physics, I've got to do psychology, babes. But I mean, I was interested in it. I did it at college, so it's not like I just kind of wandered into it. But but it was glorious. Being a student in Bath is just a beautiful experience. And then I sort of ended up doing these kind of neuroscience modules and did my master's purely because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to get a job. I was like, I'll go do my master's in, psychology and neuroscience. So it was very much, again, these random threads, but not necessarily ones that have been that well thought out.
The thing is, they're not random. They're not random because they all are bringing you to the place you are now, where you can see how these things work together and these threads weave the tapestry of who you are, and not just who you are as a person, but who you are as a witch and who you are as a yogi. To be able to take a psychology background, even in just looking at your own practice and saying, why do I want to do yoga? What is my motivation for this spell work, whatever it is, and being able to have self-awareness through your studies of psychology, neuroscience, witchcraft, and yoga. That's not random.
You're absolutely right, of course, and you are so right. And in every step, these wonderful synchronicities. When I went over to do my year, it was like an exchange thing when I came over to Boston to study, and the neuroscience labs there, they were working with, I think they were calling it contemplative neuroscience at that point. I think it's kind of blended into noetics now, but it's that whole realm of meditation, and kind of they were scanning people who regularly meditated, and they were scanning the brains of Buddhist monks, and they were kind of exploring this. And age 21, unfortunately, I was not quite confident in myself enough to be like, tell me more about this. I want to get more involved. I kick myself about that now, that I was kind of hovering around, too scared to talk to anyone at that point. But
you're 21 and you're in Boston. Like you must have been like freaking out.
I just didn't know what was, and it was just like, oh, hello, Harvard professor and Buddhist monk. This is interesting to me, but I'm too scared to tell you that. So I'm just going to kind of hover in the background. But looking back, it was like, gosh, that was, a wonderful time for, and, it was the beginning of this whole new realm of neuroscience, and the hows and the whys to the benefits of meditation, the kind of the magic, if you want to call it that, that's happening within the brain, and, the connections in the brain. So all of that kind of, all those little elements through the journey kind of came together in the book in little ways. So it was all.
I love neuroscience. I am not a neuroscientist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a terrible academic. I have a bunch of learning disabilities, and I have a mild dyslexia. So I've always had trouble in school and reading and all of that sort of thing. And but as an adult, I find anything having to do with neuroscience, the science of how the brain works, and the neural pathways of habit and the power of intention, and how we can reprogram ourselves and reprogram others in terms of negative thoughts versus positive thoughts through meditation, through magical workings. I love what you say in the book, Yoga for Witches, about the magic, using the word magic as, and I'm not going to say it right at all, Sarah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Forgive me for bastardizing your words here, but how magic is this thing that flows through everything, and we're just kind of, we use it to create. I know I'm saying it completely wrong, but magic is a word used for things like, in my mind, I go, okay, magic is neuroscience and the ability to say, change your mind literally from a negative thought process to a positive thought process, thereby leading to raising your vibration to manifest the things in your life you're trying to manifest. Right. Yeah. So that it fucking fascinates me. And I listen to like neuroscience podcasts and like books and all that sort of stuff, because I think it's brilliant. And I think if you're going to do any type of magical working, you need to be clear on how your brain works. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I'll just start this sentence more sensibly. The understanding the why, I think, is really powerful, and actually I think adds to the power of your practice. To know that the idea of positive visualization or the practice of manifestation is, it's part of intention and mindfulness that we might consider to be kind of that element of yoga, but then we can weave it into the realm of science when we're looking at, synaptic connections and pathways and mirror neurons and all these wonderful things. So it's, I know knowledge is power is, overused, but it is
so
wonderful.
True. It's so true, especially when you're talking about the power of witchcraft, because in terms, for me anyway, witchcraft or magical workings, rituals and things like that, it's focus of that energy. They're tools that we use to focus that energy to bring things in or to put things out, right? If we're trying to do some sort of magical working or ritual or spellcraft to help others or to help ourselves, we use magic to focus that intention, right? And likewise, it dovetails in with the principles of yoga. The fact that you finally put all of that together for the world at large is fantastic. I mean, how do you take these bits? What inspires you to say, well, I'm a yogi, I'm a witch, I'm a neuroscientist or a psychology master's degree, person, and I'm going to write a book about it. Why did you, how? It's just fucking brilliant. It's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
It's certainly, I talk about the book as like starting this conversation, because it's such a huge, vast, and important thing. It kind of, this is just the beginning, but I wanted to start that conversation about how we as humans, a lot of what we're seeking is the same. So wherever we are in the world, whatever our specific spiritual or religious practice, you see these similarities. And the more you look, the more similarities you find. And it's this amazing connection, this kind of this universal consciousness that we're kind of seeking these same things. And I suppose part of what it was for me is kind of bringing yoga, which is very special to me, but it is not of my culture, and I couldn't ever claim it as from my own culture.
Yes.
And bringing that and kind of holding it up to a much more kind of Western and European practice of kind of witchcraft, and being like, well, hey, you know, these two practices might seem very different, but we're seeking a lot of the same things. We're using a lot of the same practices, and if we so wish, we might want to bring these two together and look how beautifully they interweave. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So it is the beginning of that conversation. There's, you know, there's lots more. This was kind of that was me sitting down and kind of having that idea and thinking, let's start this conversation. And I'm sure, you know, deeper dive books will go into these things more in the future, but I made a start, so that's good enough for me.
But it's such an important conversation, I think, to have. You know, I first of all, I love and respect the fact that you're like, I can't claim yoga as something of my own because it is not of my culture, but it means so much to me, right?
Yeah.
It is part of who you are. And although you maybe you can't feel like you can claim it, it is still part of who you are. So it's not yours, but you belong.
My story,
but you belong to it.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't belong to you, but you belong to it. It's something that your heart just must be with, you know. And I think that's true too of witchcraft. I think often we find a pagan path and we find it, or it finds us, and we're just on it. It's not necessarily a choice. It's a heart driven must. It's who we are. It's in everything we do. And so my journey with yoga is definitely not as amazing as yours is. I took yoga as a gym class, as an elective in my first semester of college. I was like, okay, I am like the least fit person on the planet. I have to take a gym class for the credit. And I took it over winter session. So, right. So it was like, I've got to take a class over the month that everybody else is on break. And I took a yoga class that was like, instead of like once a week, it was every day for 4 weeks. And this woman, she was my first yoga instructor, and she was amazing. And we met in the gym at the college, at a community college. It was like the worst environment, but I was enthralled, and I couldn't believe how wonderful I felt doing yoga. And it was not the poses, not the asanas. It was the practice overall, the unity of body, mind, spirit that really spoke to me. And it was at that same time that I was discovering witchcraft. So I was 18 or 19 years old and just beginning my pagan journey as well. So they kind of happened at the same time for me. A lot of self-discovery going on at the same time. And as I've gone through the last 2 decades, since more than that, I don't know, 25 years since then, I've been back and forth on and off my mat. For years, I didn't take yoga because I couldn't afford it. Then it was looking for places to take yoga that combined the body, mind, and spirit. And you get a lot of what I like to call gym yoga.
Yeah.
I'd
say finding that, when you find that connection of a teacher that really, you know, and that's really special. And that's part of the kind of,
yeah, absolutely. And then, so it was back and forth trying to find the right thing for years, and then finally found the right thing and the right combination of teachers and the right classes. And then I moved. And so for me now, yoga is something I haven't found a studio or a teacher that I resonate with. And specifically through the pandemic, I can imagine for others as well as myself, it's very difficult because yoga is often something that needs to be practiced, led by a teacher, and with others. Similarly to my witchcraft, I do practice as a solitary kitchen witch, but a few times a year or once a month, I come together to celebrate with my community, and haven't been able to do that through the pandemic. What challenges have you faced with not being able to gather, and how has that affected your practice in both yoga and witchcraft?
So I think, like many of us, it's that when we're in a yoga class and it's with a teacher we really connect to, and kind of we're all in a group, it's that much like when we're in ritual, when we're around the bonfire or we're dancing or chanting, there's that energy raised that you feel it, and it is very hard to do that online. So whilst it's wonderful that I can do Zoom yoga classes and kind of online meditations and things, it's not the same. So the challenges of that have been tough. But I mean, it's nice to offer something, and some people actually really like just kind of hanging out at home doing yoga in their pajamas, and I totally, so it's got its bonuses too. But finding that connection. So I'm just gonna just cough for a moment.
It's totally fine.
Finding that connection is challenging, and I think some people come to yoga, and if their first yoga class is maybe not such a great teacher or more of a gym focused one, they might do yoga once and be like, I don't get it, it's boring, or I push too hard and I hurt myself. Or you can do yoga once and then just never want to do it again. So the importance of kind of that feeling, that connection, is so important. It has been challenging over the kind of the great disconnection of
such a great way of putting it. Such a great way, because it is, isn't it? And at the same time, I would never be doing a Zoom with you in the UK if it wasn't for the pandemic, because I would not have started this podcast and I wouldn't know how to use Zoom. So, I mean, it's a great disconnection, but it's also connected us in other ways.
Absolutely. It's forced us to find different pathways, and it's different, but there's still many wonderful things. How wonderful that we had a pandemic in the era of Zoom, and that we could do these things, because 10 years ago what would we have done? I don't know. So I'm not I am, there's gratitude here for well,
we have to focus on the gratitude, even though there's shit everywhere.
We'll focus on the gratitude,
right? Shit everywhere, but I acknowledge the shit, but I focus on the beauty. That's exactly right. So I'm interested in going back to the neuroscience. Did you ever work in a neuroscience or a psychology field? And at what point did you take that leap and say, or I mean, do you still do any of that? Or at what point did you take the leap and say, no, I'm a full-time yogi, I'm a full-time witch, I'm a full-time writer? And how did you overcome the emotional obstacles of not having, not doing this one thing or going and doing that other thing? That's a really hard thing to do.
So I think you mentioned a little way back that you're not really there with the kind of academia and academic stuff.
No, I suck at school.
See, I sucked too. So this is the funny thing about it all. It was like, I got to this point and I was like, I am the shittest academic ever, because I just didn't have the kind of meticulousness for the numbers and the statistics and things. And they just got to a point where I was just like, I can't make this a career. Like, I am not
really
good. I'm not good enough for this. I'm not. So academia was just not. And I think because I applied for a PhD at one point and I didn't get it, and I realized I didn't.
You were like, oh, thank God.
I was kind of like, actually, it was obviously not meant for me, because I didn't really try that hard. Wow. Obviously, because I didn't really want to do it. So the academic world was not for me.
Which is listening. Again, I have your audiobook, and listening to you, the style of your writing, the way you read it, the incredible research, the structure of your writing, I would never, ever in a million years think you are not like a scholastic person. Like, like
I
at
think I
all.
have my publishers a lot to thank for that. Like they kind of whipped it into, made it sound like I
I'm,
knew what I was talking about.
I
So, I mean,
am
it's not all
so,
me.
well, you completely snowed me because I was like, I'm a little intimidated. I said to my husband, I'm like, I'm interviewing Sarah Robinson and she's amazing. And she's like really smart. And I'm totally intimidated to like chat with her because like, what if I sound like an idiot? So I'm a little relieved to hear that you're not as scholastic as I thought you were.
Oh, absolutely. I was never going to be an academic. I did my master's, 10, 15 years ago? I can't remember half of it now. Like I barely remember. So it's just like, I am not that anymore. But
did you ever work in the field?
so I did my year at Harvard in the psychology and neuroscience labs, and then I went back after my master's and worked in the behavioral neuroscience department, which was we were working with like animal neuroscience, but in a nice way, in like a behavioral way. So it was so fun. We
Or
had
like zapping monkeys or anything?
No.
No.
People would bring their dogs in and we'd like play with them and do like little kind of, and it was so cute because we gave them little kind of Harvard behavioral kind of collars, and everyone was like, my dog got into Harvard, and they were just so excited, and it was so cute. So
that's like the best job you could have possibly had.
It was so good. So I wanted to be part of it, and I loved the whole kind of the learning of it. But it didn't end up with the PhD and stuff. It just kind of didn't end up being for me. And I kind of wandered around a lot after that and kind of did some stupid jobs. I was like a PA and a secretary, and I hated that. But I was terrible at it as well.
Did you feel like you were sort of fighting your nature and be like, I want to be doing all of these other things?
I think there was a time where I kind of, as I think many people do, that you wander into a job because you're like, well, I need to pay the bills, so I'll just find a job. And you find, and I just found that I just didn't care. Like I was a terrible secretary because I just
don't care.
I couldn't find it within myself to give a crap. So I was terrible at it. And luckily, it took me some time. Like it did take me some time, but luckily I kind of got to that point where I was like, well, hang on, what is it that does, bring me joy? And it started with the yoga, and I was like, right, I've been doing yoga for 30 whatever years, let's train to be a teacher. And that was about 10 years ago now. So that was like, hang on, what's been a constant in my life? Yoga. So it took me a hell of a long time to figure that bit out, but so I trained to be a yoga teacher.
Wow.
And that kind of reconnected me to the kind of the spiritual, the things I really loved about the practice. And I suppose actually that was a bit of an awakening of a lot of those things from my past that now I brought forward into a more modern kind of, how can I bring this into my life? How can I bring it into my work? And so slowly I taught more and more yoga, less and less office work, and because I'm rubbish at it anyway. And then I became a full-time yoga teacher, and and then the writing kind of came in with that, in blog form, and back when we did blogs and things,
that's like a million years ago. Right, like nobody does that anymore.
Something else that's a million years ago.
A million years old. Yes.
So blogs and things, and kind of it just the kind of the writing, in exploring my thoughts about yoga and bringing in some of my what's the experience of neuroscience and meditation and things. So it's like, right, how can I explore this? And then just basically that exploration ended up being a couple of rather terribly arranged chapters of this book. And luckily, when I sent it off to a publisher, they were like, oh, we can see where you're going with this. And I was like, oh, thank heavens for that, because it was a mess when I sent it to them. So
I imagine it was not as of a mess as you. I always think that we are our worst critics, and it's
we probably, so are.
I'm sure it wasn't as much of a mess as you thought it was, but I get that. I get that. I never would have thought, like, even now, if somebody says, what do you do for a living? I don't go, oh, I'm a writer, like, I don't know. I'm right. I never say that. Like, I don't identify that way. You identify as a yogi, as a yoga instructor, whatever. And then you're like, oh, and I wrote this book. I wrote these books. Look at all the, I wrote all these.
I'm exactly the same. Like this year on kind of my third book, it's like I've kind of been playing around with telling people, so the last one I do, and I'll be like, I'm an author. I'm not like I'm pretending, and it's like, oh God, they're gonna find out I'm,
imposter syndrome is syndrome is totally real. It's so totally funny. Real, right? Because going back to what we were talking about before, how like, again, before we started recording, we were talking about how like, I wrote this book. Everybody look at me. Look at this thing I did. No.
But don't read it. Don't read it.
Don't read it.
Because you'll find a spelling mistake or some terrible sentence that I miss. Oh God. So
but it's so good.
I published a book, but please don't read it because it's very embarrassing.
So good. It's writing a book is incredibly vulnerable. It makes you incredibly vulnerable. And when you're writing in the style of you or so many other people that I've interviewed, you are bearing your soul because these are the things that you love so much. They are part of your identity. And so at the same time, you want to share that with people and inspire people to think about things differently. And I think that's what you've done specifically with Yoga for Witches, thinking about things differently, making people realize that these two things really do go together. It's very scary to be like, I did this thing. Do you like it? I made
please
this.
Be kind.
Right. Like I was saying before, when Kitchen Witch's Guide for Love and Romance came out, I didn't really get to experience a book launch. I didn't get to do signings or intermingle with people who were buying the book or having an experience with the book. I didn't get to do that until this past summer. And people were like, I went to a festival and people were like, oh my God, I love your book. Or they would pick it up and they would flip through it and they would be like, this looks amazing. I need to buy it. And I'm like, this is my heart. Please be gentle with it. And I would hand it to them. I'd be like, this in here is all my feelings. Please don't hurt them.
That's exactly what it is. And so it's both a joyful and wonderful experience and also just a horrifying one.
Completely terrifying. Completely terrifying. It is amazing how before now, there hasn't been someone who has dovetailed together the yoga and the witchcraft. And I'm speaking of that from my personal experience, because for me, I find that I can go deeper into my yoga practice because of my witchcraft background. And I get more out of my witchcraft because of my yoga practice.
Yeah.
100%. Have you had feedback from people saying that your perspective has allowed them to see that in their own practices?
Yes, I've had some really lovely feedback. As you say, they complement each other so well. And I think a lot of people were kind of playing around with the idea maybe, but then to see it in a printed form, be like, oh, this is a thing. I can do this. So I think that's really useful. And also, as you spoke about your first yoga class and, the wonderful teacher and things. I think a lot of us, when we kind of find those things, whether it be meditation or yoga or rituals or craft, that feeling of coming home and just feeling like, this is, and that's going to be different for everybody. And it's that idea of kind of building a toolbox of things that really kind of feed your soul, whether it's gardening or walking or ritual practice. So offering people this idea of how we might blend these things together, and there's never going to be just one single path. There's kind of how might we find the things that really work for us and bring them together in a way that works. And so people have been very kind. As part of the kind of the book launch, I did a kind of yoga workshops and things. So I did kind of Yoga for Witches workshops, and it's always lovely to see people and see people come back. And so I get to see kind of the sort of people who are using the book, I suppose. I get to, see them and hang out with them, which is really, really nice. And people kind of from that point, they can go off and kind of find their own things. It's like I integrate all these different practices and I found these new things, so it kind of inspires people like, oh, how can I bring in other practices that might kind of support this practice and kind of make my own special path, my own special threads that I'm going to draw in.
Yeah.
So it's really lovely, slightly reassuring. It's like, oh, okay, I wasn't just talking complete crap. It is a reasonably good idea.
No, you're totally not talking crap at all. One of the things that I really enjoy is how you suggest goddesses to work with throughout the book. And just tapping into something you just said, how you can kind of integrate or pick and choose these things and create your own practice. Again, the combining of the two practices, right? Because we talk about witchcraft as a practice and we talk about yoga as a practice. And the fact that you weave in goddess work as well, for me specifically, is really, really great, because I work with different deities and I work with different deities. Part of what I love about being pagan is not having to choose, not having to go, oh, this is my, my paradigm in my spiritual sense. And I have to pray to this person and stand up, sit down, kneel down, whatever. Like, it's whatever works for me,
Yeah.
And being able to pick and choose the energy of a deity that perhaps today I want to identify with, or perhaps today I need a little extra help with. I like where I practice yoga in the morning, which I will admit I'm not super great at. I go through phases where I'm on the mat every day. And then I go through phases where I have to force myself. This morning was that day. And I'm saying, Dawn, just get on the mat. Just get on the mat. You don't have to do anything. Just get on it, And sometimes I have to talk myself through that. But I have an altar set up right in front of it. It's my yoga altar, but it's not, because I have Pan and Hecate and Ganesha and a fairy oracle deck and like 17 candles that can't be lit anymore. Like that's my yoga altar. And then I have my my kitchen altar as well, which I'm sitting here staring right at. And they're all different, all the different deities from all the different pantheons. And I get to choose. Why did you decide to do that specifically? Is that work that you do on your own, or is that something you just thought people might enjoy?
Honestly, it was kind of, I couldn't not. I don't think there was even a point where I considered it to be should I put this in or not? For me, it had to go in. But I use, I'm a huge fan of kind of goddess oracle decks and things in yoga and meditation practice, just because it always is such a joyful experience when I'm in a group of people and it's like, right, let's pull a goddess who's going to guide our meditation today. And it's always the perfect one. And it's just like beautiful. And then within the meditation, I usually do these kind of guided visualizations to meet or connect to the goddess. And I love doing that. It's one of my favorite things that I do in the classes I teach. And that idea of sort of these many cultures and the kind of the similarities between us, all cultures have taken kind of the best parts of ourselves with humans and created deities from them. So the strength and the power of women and the kind of the warrior goddess and the mother goddess. And so in whatever culture, whatever goddess that we feel drawn to, we are drawing inspiration, and we're drawing qualities that exist within us all, but sometimes we need a little help to reconnect to. So whether you need a little bit of extra, Kali, fearsome goddessness to kind of get through your January, or you need some time with a kind of a Kuan Yin, compassion, there'll be, those emotions and those qualities that we feel in whatever way that we need to come home to. So bringing the goddess work in is a beautiful magic all of its own that I love to weave into my practice, and hopefully many others do as well. But yeah, they had to be in there as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
So I'm,
Is there a particular deity that is almost like your default? When you're not sure what kind of energy you need, or who shows up for you all the time, is there a particular deity that you work with on a regular basis?
So overlooking my desk, hang on, let me grab her a minute. I'll put the earphones back in, hang on. Very cool, very smooth.
Very
So
smooth.
I have a little Ceridwen, and she has a little tiny cauldron.
Oh,
There
isn't
we
she
go.
sweet?
So the cauldron, I think, as far as witches and goddesses go, I think Ceridwen just is a beautiful, she kind of sits and watches over me as I'm kind of stirring up words and finding transformation. But yeah, she's kind of, I suppose she's a local goddess to me, a Welsh or Celtic goddess. So she's of this area anyway. But for me, that idea of the cauldron it's always coming back to, whatever I'm kind of brewing up with
Always
the books,
stirring, always stirring.
Or stirring up with movement or breath work. So, I think she's always hanging out. And, I love working with all manner of goddesses, but she's the one that's always here. She's always on the mantelpiece watching over.
And you're speaking often mostly about goddesses. Do you work with any male deities?
I started working a little bit more with male deities in the last year or so, in that kind of serendipitous way. This lovely app developer from Ireland called, I can't remember what the company is called now, but he's created this app called Celtic Whispers, and he wanted to kind of use some of my meditations, and he was like, can you do some kind of male ones as well, so that we've got a kind of a bit more of a balance, all these goddesses. So I did some meditations with the Green Man and is it Canunos, the horned stag?
Canunos, yeah.
I never know how to say it.
Yeah.
It's like
and
one of the ones where I'm like,
everybody pronounces it differently, so it's all right.
So,
he knows.
Actually,
he knows.
Yeah, he knows. He doesn't care what we call it.
No.
He's not bothered. He's having, he's doing his own thing anyway. But that was really fun because that's not something I've done so much of.
Was that difficult for you to kind of tap into those kind of energies when you are so goddess focused and so feminine focused in your workings? Was that difficult?
I think part of my journey this year, it was great because I thought maybe it would be, but actually I tend to kind of just, for want of a better word, I tend to channel my meditations when I'm recording them. I don't plan them out. I just kind of, light a candle, close my eyes, and just, let's see where we end up. And I found actually it was a really nice experience, and that idea of these kind of watchmen of the forest, these great wise sentinels watching over us, and that was really nice. So I think that was, and I'm still, very much not an expert of these things, but I enjoyed that, again, that beginning the conversation. So that's been part of something new I've been working with over the last year or so, is to work more with, male deities. So
I love it.
Fun.
I love it. And we want to talk more about what you have that's new. So let's take a quick break, hear from our amazing sponsors who are helping us to continue this fabulous podcast. And when we come back, we will talk about your new projects. We'll be right back. And we are back with the amazing Sarah Robinson. I am having the best time learning about your journey and talking all yoga and goddesses and everything. But I am ridiculously excited because you are coming out with a new book that is speaking to my heart on every level.
It's so you. It's so you.
It's so you. Tell us all about your new Kitchen Witch book that's coming out.
So super exciting. So Kitchen Witch, there's a tiny section in Yoga for Witches called Kitchen Witch, and it was just this little kind of snippet of this idea of the story of the Kitchen Witch, and my publishers were like, there's more here, like this, this could be something. So basically, just this occupied me during lockdown, was delving into the Kitchen Witch and all things kind of, where did this word come from? When did we start calling women, or when did we start calling people kitchen witches? And, this gorgeous, rich history of food magic, and how sacred food has been to us since the beginning of time. So it's this kind of exploration from the beginning of society and kind of valuing food and using it as sacred, as offerings to deities and in ritual, and then following that all the way through to the wise women and the healers and the women who hung charms and wrote sigils on kitchen walls, all the way through to this kind of modern idea of what we consider a kitchen witch to be today. So it's a huge thing, and there were times when I was just like, it's just too much, I can't, it's never going to fit in a book. Like,
how do you define what a kitchen witch is today?
So I don't have the book yet. I don't have it in print yet, but I've got the blurb that we call it at the back that I thought I'd read, because it'll just, I always stumble over my words. But
the blurb. But I'm interested in, you're talking about how, it went from being this thing to being this thing to being this thing. Mm-hmm. And then how we define as a kitchen witch today, is the way I define myself as a kitchen witch. And my definition of kitchen witchery is whoever is a person that uses food for spiritual goals, cooks with intention to stay close to their own spiritual sense, their ancestors, the changing of the seasons, and the earth itself. That's my sort of like 2-line definition for what a kitchen witch is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would be something very similar. It's that kind of, I'm not going to put it as succinctly as you, but that idea that we kind of, in a way, we are all witches, because we are all capable of connecting to that. In that same way that we are all witches, we are all kitchen witches, because every single one of us here today is here because we have enough food to eat, that we have been nourished and nurtured, that we have ancestors who were nourished and nurtured and helped to kind of arrive at this point. And the sacredness of food has kind of changed a lot over the generations.
Yeah. I find that it's not, especially in classes I teach about kitchen witchery, and kind of, I always refer to turning a light bulb on, turning a light switch on, and people don't realize how sacred food is, or the process of preparing food, or that food preparation, even if you're microwaving something, there's a ritual to it. There's an inherent intentionality to it, or at least that there should be. Again, even if you are microwaving something or driving through a drive-through, the gratitude around it, or the intention of eating this food, or where did it come from, or how is this going to nurture my body and my spirit? Sometimes food is for soul, not for body. I mean, nobody actually needs a hot fudge sundae to survive. We don't, but our spirits sometimes need it for soothing and comfort. So there's also a subtext to your kitchen witch book, right? It's like folk tales and fairies, and to give us the whole thing.
Folklore and Fairytales. Okay, so I'll read you the thing. Welcome to a place of great magic, the kitchen. Magic, superstition, cooking, and food rituals have been intertwined since the beginning of humankind. Kitchen witch, food, folklore, and fairy tale is an exploration of the history and culture of food, folklore, and magic, and those skilled in healing and nourishing. Herbalists, wise women, cooks, cunning folk, and the name many of them would come to bear, witch. Kitchen witch is an invitation to see the magic in every corner of your kitchen. With the kitchen witch as our guide, we'll explore food, nature, magic, and transformation. We'll discover what the name of kitchen witch could mean to us in the modern interpretation of ancient practices. May this book of stories and ideas show you that there's magic in the mundane, witchcraft within your walls, and the goddess really is in the details.
It's amazing. Do you specifically identify as a kitchen witch? Is this something that's new for your spiritual practice? Or I think a lot of people have come to kitchen witchery through the pandemic. I mean, I think in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 3 or 4 different people coming out with kitchen witchery books.
The thing, isn't it?
It's so the thing right now. And I'm like, damn it, I was early. But
it's like everyone was making sourdough bread.
Exactly. So, but that's
that
what I'm
idea
saying.
Of coming back to the kitchen.
The idea of coming back to the kitchen, being more connected with our food, where it comes from. Again, where I am in America, in New England, there is lots of local farms, lots of local produce, and lots of local meats and things like that. But where I grew up in New York, there was not. So there was always this disconnect of just going to the grocery store and buying what was on the shelf, no matter how it was prepared or whether it was humanely raised or what. Those weren't even, that wasn't even a vocabulary that we had in the 1980s and the 1990s, thinking about where our food came from. Your food came from the grocery store. We didn't think about things like that. So do you feel that is this an influx of these practices across the board, right? In our community and without our community, within and without our community. But for you personally, have you always practiced a level of kitchen witchery? Would you identify as a kitchen witch? Or is this something that has been awakened in you through the pandemic?
So in the dedication of Yoga for Witches, I dedicated it to my mum. And I said that she was the finest kitchen witch, and she has been a fantastic cook her whole life. And then my nan is also a fantastic cook, and there's kind of a reputation within the women of my family as being feeders, as in people that love to feed, which is not unique to us in any way. I'm sure lots of people very similarly, but specifically during the war, when my nan was very young, she experienced extreme lack of food, and that was definitely, that affected her behavior with food to this day. She loves to make sure that we have more than enough to eat, and this kind of abundance of food, you know, because having this insane abundance of food is still relatively a new thing. So I think definitely the pandemic kind of just kind of flagged it up to us, I guess, that abundant food is not a given, and to many people it's not a given day to day. So the idea of seeing the sacred in food is, whether you consider yourself a kitchen witch or not, or any other realm of pagan or witch, the sacredness of food and the gratitude for having food, whatever it may be. If you've got something warm in your tummy, that's pretty magical. So certainly it's a time, I think, where we're all kind of like remembering that food is very special and sacred, maybe enjoying a bit more the kind of the magic that can be worked in the kitchen and around the hearth, and the magic of finding safety and comfort and memory and connection around our hearth, whatever that may be, whether that's, you know, your microwave or your kind of open fire. So there is an element of, again, that idea that this connects us all, and in that sense we all have this kind of magical element, and we could call ourselves kitchen witches. The honest answer to whether I consider myself a kitchen witch is I don't know, but within the Kitchen Witch book, I did a lot of deep dive into kind of the witch hunts and the witch trials, and I think it is a luxury that we have now to be able to call ourselves witches if we want to, or say that we don't know and not have someone stand in front of us and kill us, basically, for whatever answer we give. So it is a real luxury to be able to say, I don't know, I'm still figuring it out, or you know, I feel a certain thing, but I'm not going to share it because, you know, whatever. So I've certainly it's been a journey for sure, like going through this whole realm of kind of ancient times when the women who brewed beer and baked bread were kind of priestesses and sacred women, and these amazing goddesses of food and hearth, and then, you know, how some of them transformed into being just completely demonized, and even today, you know, women who kind of cook and tend the hearth at home are kind of often lesser valued than
100%.
These big kind of celebrity chefs and things.
It's 100% true. It's 100% true. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about people who the word witch is still so, I don't know, villainized. It's still so misunderstood, you know, and it's every time it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, is somebody going to judge me? Or, you know, I tend to use the word pagan because I don't practice solely Wicca. So I'm often saying I'm pagan, and then people are like, well, what does that mean? But then when I can introduce myself as the kitchen witch, people get that.
Yeah. It's good, you know, people know that word, I think, and they recognize it, and it's it has quite like it's got a lot of positive connotations in a way that the word witch doesn't, which is interesting. Yes. That people think kitchen witch, they think cozy, friendly, you know, good wishes, and, yes. You know, and we have the little kitchen witches that hang in. We literally have those little hags on broomsticks that hang. So it's kind of this this archetype, this version of the witch that has become a very positive thing, which is great, because it's nice to be able to learn and remember from the negativity, but also to bring those elements and bring them forward and be like, okay, how can we build something positive from this, you know, very mixed history.
I love that you're focusing on the history of kitchen witchery, and talking about those wise women and those tribal women and those village elders. You know, I often say that I am a kitchen witch from a long line of kitchen witches, but they never would have called themselves that. I mean, maybe back in Italy, I had a relative that was, you know, strega, or would have identified themselves and said, I'm strega, but they were so into being Catholic, you know, that you couldn't use that word. Meanwhile, my grandmother had a sandwich for whatever was wrong with you. She could feed you something that would make it better.
Love that.
You know, anything that you're celebrating, if you're happy, if you're sad, it doesn't matter. The ritual of the food was what was important. How to do things, what apron you wore during whatever season it was that you're cooking for, you know, the ritual of, she used to make dandelion omelets. We would go to her house in the summertime or the springtime. And my grandmother grew up during the Depression and didn't have very much. And again, she understood that, oh, look, there are dandelions growing in my yard. And she would go out into the backyard and she would gather up dandelions, pull them right out of the grass, chop them up. And that's what we would eat, you know? So that's kitchen witchery. I like, it doesn't matter what you call it. That's magic. That's ritual. That's nurturing and feeding the heart and soul. And I love that you're going back and saying, these were the women, these were the people, these were the stories that brought us where we are today. And I don't think, in terms of kitchen witchery, including myself, I don't think anybody's talking about that. I don't think anyone's addressing that. So I love the spin on it.
Yeah, I wanted to tell their stories, you know, and remember, you know, your ancestors who saw that power of the dandelion. Like, that's amazing. And it's like these little acts of magic that kind of get forgotten in the bigger stories of history. It's like picking out those lovely little stories and the kind of the women who were there stirring their cauldrons and just keeping their house warm and welcoming and you know, healing. You know, they were healing their children and their communities, and that was so valuable. But it gets dismissed as this kind of, you know, old wives' tales, and, you know, and maybe not as celebrated as the amazing thing that it is. So it's part of a kind of a remembering and a celebration of just awesome, ordinary people doing wonderful things in the kitchen.
The ordinary. I love that you use the word ordinary, because it is every day. I was having a conversation with Ivo Dominguez Jr., and he had said to me, I was very intimidated to interview him because he's Ivo Dominguez Jr., you know, oh my God. And he was the first person I think that I had on the podcast that I didn't have a personal relationship with. Like, when I started this podcast, I was just calling friends and I was like, would you do that? Would you do this for me? And I think he was the first person that I interviewed that actually was someone I didn't have an already rapport with. Yeah. And we started talking about kitchen witchery, and he said, which kind of blew my mind a little bit, was kitchen witchery can often be thought of as a lesser practice, a lesser magic, a lower magic, because anybody can do it. And I was like, you're right. And the converse is true. It is a higher magic because everyone can do it. It is tactile. It is real. It is something that can be used for healing, for nurturing. And then when done with intention, can be used to transform as well. Yeah. Did you find anything like that in your writings that would make you think those, you know, along those same lines?
just exactly the same, you know, that everyday kind of healing magic that these women were doing in their community was just, you know, it's, for many of us, it's the reason we're here today, because our ancestors had, you know, a poultice on a wound, or they had a woman who knew how to deliver a baby, and there would have been these wise women within these groups of people, within these villages, within these small communities. And, you know, their work was so important, but in the same way, so, because it all happened behind closed doors, you know, it was the kind of the women's work. So, you know, when women were having babies or when they were menstruating, it was just kind of, it was hidden away and it was kind of not talked about. But if there weren't these women helping them, then there wouldn't have been healthy babies. And it is just, they were doing it all. And then they
some
get told
man,
they're witches. Yeah, exactly. It's a bunch of witches. Midwives are all the devil.
Right.
Hang them all. So it's infuriating as well, because it's kind of, they were so undervalued. And you see reflections in this today. You know, a lot of kind of caring professions, a lot of housewife roles are kind of, it's just kind of, you don't really think of it as being that important, or that just kind of happens. And it's like, guys, this is it. This is the
basis of society. This is right. Exactly. And the power struggle of, well, this woman can cook a meal or you know, put something on a wound or bring life into the world. She's more powerful than we are, maybe the men in charge. How do we frown upon her? How do we keep her back? How do we keep her down? How do we make sure that she doesn't take power from us? And you can see that rippling through society in terms of crazy ass things like wage gap and, you know, reproductive rights. And I mean, I don't want to get up on a soapbox. Okay. We're talking about kitchen witchery, but the truth is, like, or even just, it all connects. And the frowning upon, you know, somebody being like, well, I'm a feminist, so I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be home taking care of babies because I'm a feminist. And I'm like, no, feminism means you get to choose whatever the fuck you want. And if you want to be home taking care of babies and cooking all day, that's feminism. If you want to choose to be a bazillionaire and, you know, a mogul, that's feminism. You know, we are powerful, and the witches are powerful, and the wise women are powerful. And the simplest magics of making a tea, or, I mean, okay, I spent 3 days making soup this weekend. 3 days. Not something I do often, right? I mean, yeah, I cook all the time. It's sort of my thing. But the magic and the transformation of taking locally raised chickens, roasting them up, then boiling them for 24 hours into bone broth, then turning that bone broth into a soup, literally took 3 days. And it is transformative magic. Not only is what I made that I transformed these ingredients into this thing, but it also heals the body, heals the soul. People don't want to think that they can't do that on their own. So if you can do it, then it must be bad because I can't do it. Right. But the truth is, when it comes to kitchen witchery, we all can do it. It's super fucking easy to put a bunch of shit in a crock pot and let it sit for 24 hours. It takes no effort, but that's magic when it's done with intention. Right. I am jazzed about your book on kitchen witchery. I'm jazzed because, like, I love to learn something different about what I think I already know about, you know. There's a lot of different, sorry.
No,
it's okay. What's the one thing that you learned in writing your kitchen witch book that really surprised you or made you think or took you aback for a moment?
I suppose part of the journey of bringing that subtitle, The Food, Folklore and Fairy Tale, was the wonderful ways within our own stories that we brought the power of food, like food and fear about losing food or not having enough, is just filled within our folklore and within our fairy tales. The idea of being hungry and journeying into the deep dark woods, like Red Riding Hood and like Hansel and Gretel. And it's that seeing all these beautiful themes within our stories and how we told them it's more evidence, is as if we needed any more, about how magical food can be and how integral to everything, our stories, our history, our ancestors, our healing. So all of the fairy tales and the folklore, I just had such a gorgeous time sharing those and kind of weaving those stories, because they're lovely, they're enchanting. It's lovely to kind of feel enchanted with the food that you're making, or finding these little stories about just everything, about coffee, about whiskey, about vegetables, about fruit. There's stories within them all, and that's part of that, seeing the sacred and seeing the magic in what we might consider to be very everyday things. So
it sounds as if most of the stories and stuff are European in nature, in their, in the folklore and that sort of thing. It's like the European witchcraft kind of stuff.
Yeah, I tried to stick with my homelands, as it were.
Yes.
So
yes, that makes sense.
With Europe, but I got some wonderful. I've met a amazing bruja of coffee magic who's shared her story.
Ooh.
And I know I grabbed her and was like,
oh my god,
please, I need you. And my beautiful friend Kayati, who talks about how she cooks Indian food with her grandmother and how that helps her remember her heritage and festivals and things. So I've tried to bring in stories of other cultures, but try to have people from those cultures bring those stories in, because they're obviously far more qualified to share the stories than I am.
I love it.
So I've tried to mix it a bit, but in the stories I am telling, I'm trying to kind of stick within my own cultural homelands.
So I'm curious if any of the yoga background is bleeding into the Kitchen Witch book, and if you get into any Ayurveda in the book.
Originally, there was some Ayurveda, because Ayurveda itself is a fascinating science of food.
And for those of us who are not, for those people that are not familiar with Ayurveda, can you explain a little bit about what that is? Because most people don't know what that is.
So Ayurveda, I think, directly translates as, oh God, I knew it and now it's gone out of my head. It's something to do with like the science of life, or the way of life. And it's seeing the energy within people and how we can use food and meditation and yoga. It's often considered the sister science of yoga, but it is very much about food and herbs and balancing our energies in a kind of holistic way. So it's a wonderful thing, but I am not an expert in it. And in the end, the book was so massive, my publishers, we decided to take the Ayurveda out, because I'm not really the person to share it. But it is fascinating, and hopefully, and there are so many beautiful Ayurvedic cookbooks out there that I encourage you very much to go and seek out Ayurveda, because it is. Again, it is kitchen witchery.
Absolutely.
Not, I'm not saying it's a direct translation or anything, but it's like all cultures find magic in food and healing in food and connection in food. And it's just kind of, you can find it within all cultures, which is beautiful.
That's wonderful. I am so excited about your new book. I obviously a little obsessed with your other book, but really excited to see what comes through with this book and the stories. And it's just, when I saw that you were coming out with a Kitchen Witch book, I was like, oh shit, I am all about this. So
same. And your beautiful Kitchen Witch book as well. So it's like, we can have a Kitchen Witch book party.
We should have a Kitchen Witch book party. Oh my God. So at the time of recording this, it's just after the new year, but when this airs, it's likely that your book is going to be available, because it's coming out in March 2020.
Yes.
Right. So this episode is probably going to air sometime end of March, beginning of April. So if you're listening to this, you will be able to order this amazing book. Sarah, tell us about where we can find you, where we can find this book, how to order, how to follow you, all of your Instagrams and Facebookies and all that stuff. Tell us how to find you so we can stalk you a little bit.
That's fun. So my publishers, womancraftpublishing.com, have a wealth of beautiful books, including Kitchen Witch, Food, Folklore and Fairy Tales. So you can buy direct from the publisher, and supporting your local indie publisher is always cool. So thumbs up for that. You can also buy it on all the big usual online booksellers. So you know, some of the big ones, I think, Book Depository are just free shipping anywhere in the world. So if you have any trouble kind of getting it to you, then the Book Depository is great. And, you know, the mega ones obviously are there too, yes. The online ones. To find me, I'm on Instagram as @Yoga for Witches, all one word. So you can find me there. And if you search Yoga for Witches and my name, Sarah Robinson, that'll bring you to pretty much everything. So there's Facebook, there's YouTube,
your
Instagram.
website.
My website. So my website that's still my kind of yoga space as well. So it's weird because I was like, it's kind of a yoga website, but my books are there too.
So good though. And it's your brand. It's you.
Exactly.
It's just so
my thing is random things. So that's fine.
And the website is?
It's sentiayoga.com. So that's SINTIA yoga.com. Sentia was an ancient Roman goddess of awareness.
I love it. That's so, Sarah Robinson is amazing. I heart you so big. Okay. So one last question that I ask to everyone. Okay. I ask this question to everyone at the end. If you could have me as a kitchen witch make you one meal, what would it be and why?
It's not a good answer, I don't think, but I love your recipes and your chorizo and sweet potato. I just love me some of that. So it's not magical or anything. It's just that I really want to eat that. So
the chorizo, the sweet potato, the chorizo and sweet potato hash, or the stuffed peppers.
The hash.
It is. Yeah. I would make it any day of the week, but why? Why would you? Is it because of the combination of the spicy and the sweet?
It's like sweet potato is like, it's kind of sweet and warming. And then you have that super kind of the smoky, salty of the chorizo. And it's so warming. And it's kind of, I consider it to be comfort food. Like it's like, and also, you know,
it's so good. It's funny because I like to make that dish with leftover sweet potatoes. So like I made roasted chicken the other night. I had 3 chickens. 2 of them went in this stock I was telling you about. And the other one was just dinner. Right. And I made a huge, like 5 or 6 sweet potatoes chopped up to go on the side of that. I know I wasn't going to eat 5 sweet potatoes, but I made extra so that over the weekend I can make my hash.
Yeah,
I can't wait. And I have farm fresh eggs, and I'm gonna crack a farm fresh egg on top. See, for me right now, it's time to eat. I don't know. It's probably dinner time by you too, right?
It's going to be dinner time for me soon. So
it's the easiest recipe, the sweet potato hash. Usually, I come up with a new recipe for my guest. There's nothing.
I've already seen, you know, because I love your recipe. So I was like, yeah, I want that one, please. So, you know.
Thank you so much. I have had the best time. Thank you so much for joining me on Conversational Witchcraft. This has been an absolute delight. I heart you so big. Everybody,
I heart you.
Find Sarah Robinson online. She's on Instagram at Yoga for Witches. She can find her at her website, sentiayoga.com. Buy her Kitchen Witch book. Buy the book. Buy the book. Buy the book. It's going to be great. Hopefully by the time you're listening to this, I've already read it 3 times. I'm super excited. Thank you, Sarah, so much for being here. And until next time, I wish everyone many blessings and so much gratitude. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.